Becky, over to you.
So hi, yeah, I'm Becky. I have to say that this talk was co-written with my business partner and co-founder of co-design, Adam Stark. I'll talk a little bit about how we met and the work we've done. But in short, we met together at C4DM doing our PhDs, and I'm pretty sure that everyone at C4DM is really just doing research while they wait for their band to make it. And Adam actually is today in a production rehearsal for his band Rumor Cubes, who's performing at Glastonbury this weekend. So that's why he's not with us today. So what we've been up to, and kind of what are the things that we can pull out of what has been happening outside of the academic research environment. So up until 2011, Adam and I were doing our PhDs here at Queen Mary at the Center for Digital Music. Adam doing a lot of real-time performance tracking, beat tracking type things. I was doing a lot of acoustics work with impulse responses and reverberation. And we were coming to the end of our respective contracts and decided we wanted to take the leap outside of this campus and try something else and kind of do our own thing. And so we founded Co-Design. At the time, we had no idea what it was going to do, how we were going to make money. And eventually it came to be an agency. We didn't even know that was a word. But a digital agency is basically what we are, which is kind of like a consultancy doing work for clients for hire. Working on a lot of interactive, creative projects where our clients are advertising firms or artists or designers. And it split then this past year. We've actually made a bit of a split in the company. We were doing a lot of education work and doing a lot of teaching of people who come from an arts background, such as artists and designers or students in creative media, how to do programming and work with electronics, working a lot with processing and Arduino. And we decided to keep Co-Design as a company that does education, a social enterprise, and founded Anti-Alias Labs, which is taking on the consultancy, the agency portion of what we're doing. Excuse me. So this is a project that we are working on right now. We're never very far from Queen Mary, so this is a Queen Mary supported project. This is the human harp. This is the reference to the Brooklyn Bridge that was made in the title. And this is with working with artist in residence here, Queen Mary Di Mainstone, who is with the headband smiling on the side there. And this is an installation that the hope is over the next year will be developed in these string modules that will get mounted on the Brooklyn Bridge. And as you pull the different strings, you generate music, either in a performative setting or in a setting where the public kind of walks by and interacts with it. So this is just doing some tests. Adam's been working on the audio generation side, and I was helping with the hardware design. And then on the co-design side, we are just some images from our workshops. So we have in the corner, this is workshop at the Tate Modern a couple weekends ago, working with the Tate Collective, which is kind of a young person's program there. We have a slightly surreal day with George Osborne in the basement of the Roundhouse for a Nesta program launch. And then also we're working just recently with kids using Scratch a lot, which is a kind of a programming environment that has it's out of the MIT Media Lab, and as far the user experience is very well designed for it. As a programmer, you come into it and you're like, this is awkward and weird, I don't know what's happening, but they haven't designed it for you. They've designed it for a 10-year-old. And the 10-year-olds, you give it to them for 30 seconds, and they figured out how to record their own audio, draw their own characters, and the room's already like a mess of noise. It's really, really well thought out for the user experience of the actual user, not the researcher. Another researcher might find it awkward, but it's not designed for researchers. And in general, your work isn't designed for researchers. So what have we learned from what we've been doing since we have left the university environment? So we kind of have 4 main points here, and then I'm going to close with some suggestions of the tools that we use that might be quite useful for your own academic work. In particular, if you want something that's a bit easier to package together in a way that could be shared with your end user, even if that end user is another researcher in another university. How do you make a nice native application that runs on cross-platform that you can send instead of having someone have to compile something down from source themselves. How can you distribute? These are a couple tools that are used a lot in the digital arts that I think could be really, really useful for researchers as well. I know some people already use some of these tools. So the first thing that I would say, if you want to be better at programming and you want to be better, write better code, have more confidence in your code, you want to be able to write your code faster, teach beginners. You have a huge resource if you're inside of a university where you have a ton of students who don't know how to program, who are taking courses learning how to do this. And I don't just mean the lecture side, but do the lab side. I TA'd for 3 years in kind of the introductory programming for students here at QM. And it was really useful and really helped build the confidence of what you would do in kind of the private sphere for teaching workshops. But you have to become really good at the basics. And if your basics are really strong, your more complicated software will only improve from that. And so in particular, being able to sit down, look at code that you did not write, the person who wrote it barely knows what they're doing, and pick out, you're missing a semicolon right there, that's why it's not compiling, is a learned skill. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's incredibly useful to be able to look cold at some code and say, yeah, this is the thing that's going on. And maybe it's not so clean. Maybe they've learned a little bit more programming, and it's not just a semicolon anymore. So how do you sit down at someone else's code? Again, you haven't written. What's the test you need to do? You have a little bit of the pressure because you don't want to save face. You want to save face in front of the student and not look like you're just bumbling around, not knowing what's happening. So what are some clean, easy tests that help you determine what's going wrong and how you can fix it? And then on top of that, thinking of questions and examples for a student to work through who only has, no power supply. There we go. Who only, we'll conquer computers someday. Thinking of examples for a student to have to tackle who's only learned, a for loop last week, and thinking of questions and then also answers that use a very limited set of skills can also help strengthen your own code, where maybe you don't need to rely on a giant software package of a bunch of things, implementing and thinking about clever ways to solve a problem instead of just doing import this library and it solves it for you. The second thing I would recommend is not just document your code, but document it publicly. This is an image from one of our tutorials. We have codeassign.com and we have learning.codeassign.com, and part of this was generated from just kind of the philosophy of the business we were starting. And it's all tutorial material that supports all of our workshops, and all of that is available for free under Creative Commons, because we believed if you're coming on a workshop, we're not teaching you anything magical or secret. There's lots of resources online. You're just paying for our time. You're not paying for our knowledge. Our knowledge is free and up there. And having this just kind of public source is just a media wiki, nothing really fancy. But then it can be very useful in which you forget yourself that you knew how to do a thing. And there's been multiple times where both Adam and I have Googled a thing of how do you use this one library, and one of the top Google hits is our own website. You're like, oh, well, I knew it at one point. This happened also in my PhD where it was just a really dry, setting up a database using a particular kind of architecture so that I could then use this in my research in a particular way. But it was a lot of libraries, it was kind of big faff. But I decided to actually document what was going on and just put it in a blog post. And it was incredibly useful when I got a new university machine a year later, and I needed to reset up that database again on a new system. And you just have it laid out for you. And along with having it being a place for you, so you're not just documenting, but the documenting publicly is the I word that was mentioned by Jamie, is impact. So part of our learning site, in a business sense, but researchers have to think like business people, you're the business person, you're the CEO of your career, is we have roughly 11,000 to 12,000 website hits a month and growing on our content, which is not amazing in the scale of the web, but it's not bad. It's not a bad number, having that many zeros. And it drives people to know what we do as a business. So having skills up there, saying that these are tutorials and just the basics of using a library to use the Kinect camera within the processing environment, which is this as an image from, it brings in people to your work. And maybe you're about a lot more than using a particular library to identify people within a scene using computer vision, but it's a hook in. It's a Googleable thing that people find, and they're like, oh, what else do you do? And it can grow your own personal impact for your project, as well as just kind of your own personal portfolio. Then I would also, this is a lot learned from doing more interactive live performance things, but also in doing work for someone else. And the someone else could be a paying client, but it also could be your supervisor. And it is code as if you expect someone to ask you to change something at the very last minute when you have little time to test to make sure that what you just did actually works. This is an image from a performance that was at the South Tank at the Tate Modern a couple weeks ago. And it's a jacket being worn by Jacques Green, who's a house producer, as he performs, and it has video cameras in it. And then it's projecting the images onto the sides of the tank. And we had very, very little time in the tech rehearsal to see if this was all working properly. And basically, it was supposed to be a different projector showing a different image from a different camera. And that got completely thrown out at the last minute, and we had to use the same image on multiple projectors. But the code had to then quickly change, and instead of do kind of a commandable, change the which camera you want to watch, kind of do a live VJ type version instead of just a static, show a different camera on a different thing. And you can't really anticipate that. But what you can anticipate is that you have clean classes. You know what that class does. You have an object that you know what you can call, and you know it will do this thing. And you know if you just restructure your code in a way, it will still work. And so coding expecting that you're going to be asked to kind of tweak it and do something different, it encourages you to keep things separate and modular and clean. It encourages you to have a testing suite that can be done quickly and just do, for the very basics, a sanity check. This thing I just did, does that just break everything? Did I just completely screw it all? And this was definitely a big point from Adam. So we both were on the software carpentry, the very first software carpentry workshop that C4DM did a couple years ago. And a big critique comes from test-driven development. Oh, I can't test my research software. I can't think of good tests. I'm doing interactive things. You can't test that. Adam's been very active. He's one of the core kind of developers on these musical gloves that Imogen Heap is performing with and commissioning, essentially. And it was all written in Max. It's getting changed to a different platform. But this is, so it's a picture of what the gloves, the current dev version of the gloves, performance of Imogen with the gloves. And this is Adam's testing panel in the older system, in which he could hit this button up here, and it would send out a message to every part of the rig. So he has Ableton Live, he has a Kinect camera, he has some other pieces of software working as middleware on the same computer, along with actual pieces of hardware in the gloves. And he says hello to all of them. And if they all say, hi, how are you? It shows green light back. If it's not, and so he just has a panel. If everything, if it's all green circles, he knows he's good. If he has a single dark circle, he knows, okay, Ableton Live crashed again. We need to figure out how to get that going. But that's the reason why why we don't have sound. Because just saying, do you have sound or not in a live performance is not a test. It's merely a failure. And so this was, I think, one of Adam's crowning achievements of getting that whole system a bit more stable. And then the last thing we've definitely learned from doing work outside of academia, doing software development, is to manage expectations. And part of this is managing the expectations of your end user. Maybe your end user is a client or a supervisor or a reviewer. But it could also be a tech transfer office person. It could be someone who's trying to help you commercialize your work to the outside world. And it's very important that everyone understands what they're talking about. And that really falls into 3 areas. So you have the boundaries of the problem. So what is the problem you're trying to solve, and what is the problem you're not trying to solve? Are you even considering 3/4 time in your data, or are you just doing 4/4? Are you even looking at a moving listener position within your room model, or are you only looking at static position but moving sound source? If you're not even considering one thing from the very get-go, that's essential that everybody knows that is the problem you're looking at, not a different problem. And then what are the boundaries of the algorithm of what you're trying to solve for? So you've come up with this really clever thing. It's this just amazing, like, 3-step approach where you change into the frequency domain, you do this other stuff, you sprinkle some fairy dust on it, and it's amazing. It's like 95% like success rate on what you're doing. But maybe that only works, again, for music signal that has a drum track. Maybe it doesn't work if you have choral music and it has no beat at all, it just completely fails. Understand what are the limitations of the algorithm. When will it work, when will it won't? And then, what are the boundaries of your implementation? Have you written it in MATLAB? Does it have something called an API? Because you say that you've packaged something together into an SDK, a software development kit. It's important that you know the answer. It's incredibly important that the tech transfer office knows the answer of that and to what they're trying to sell to people who might want to license what you're doing. So be upfront and be like, no, it's a Python script that shows some statistical, like, solid results. However, this is no way close to being put into a software library that someone can just license and stick right into their production line code, which is what a commercial partner is going to want to be able to do. Or say, okay, yeah, you need to do these things in order to get to that point. And it's just really important for everyone. It's really just managing to be on the same page. It's not like saying, oh, it's kind of crap or it's not good enough yet. It's just saying, this is where we are, this is what you can do with it, and where to go on from there. So that's kind of my 4 main things that I think we've learned from doing outside research. Outside software development more than research. And so then these are just a couple of the tools that we've been using that I think can, if you don't know about them, they might be very beneficial for you in your own work. So processing, so all of these are free and open source. I didn't look at the licensing terms of all of them. I mean, you're definitely good for any academic work if you want to commercialize stuff on top of these platforms. I'm not entirely sure what the licensing terms are for that. The processing is a framework written in Java. It's the oldest out of all of them. It's completely cross-platform, across Windows, Mac, and Linux. And all 3 of these are systems that make it really easy to just get a window, get some buttons, draw some images, interact with media, and really useful tools. So processing's in Java. Open frameworks and Juice are both in C++. So with Juice being really quite good for doing audio work, but Juice is the newest one. Adam's a huge fan right now of it. The Gloves project is all moving to Juice, while Open Frameworks is a little bit more established in the field. But just thought I'd throw that up there for really useful tools to get your stuff packaged together and start getting your user experience a bit better with that as well. So there are my contact details. I will be sticking these slides up on SpeakerDeck at some point today, and I'll tweet from Twitter. I'm deleting 0. With that link when that's all up there. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Alan?
It's actually, it wasn't a question, just a comment on the use of processing. I agree with processing has been a great way of introducing students to audio programming. We've never done any programming before. And I was thrashing around for years to find an environment that enabled them to do the programming without having to engage too much with what classes and objects are, and so we can get something up and running quite quickly. But I am thinking of abandoning, because we've had some of the libraries are better than others, and some libraries are more flexible than others, and we've found some compatibility issues. So teaching next year, I'm going to be moving to the HTML5, the new web audio API, which is up and running. It's a Google initiative, as far as I can make out. So if that will make it easier. It's the same simplicity of programming for basic programming environment, but much more consistent in use, I think.
Yeah, I think Java's not the most friendly environment for writing anything with audio.
Exactly.
And that is definitely a downfall of the processing. Otherwise, brilliant. Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay. So thanks very much again, Becky. Thank you.